Hey guys, it's Lando. I'm back to rant about the Seattle wide receivers. We're talking DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. These are two guys that have been hotly debated, and I'm going to work through it with you on my process. I'll give you a projection where I see them, when I'm taking them, who I'm taking first, and how it's going to be for my how I kind of construct my team for 2020 with these two wide receivers. So we will start with Tyler Lockett. He's been a very good wide receiver as of late, and he really pops off on models like the reception perception by Matt Harmon, and he's been a very efficient guy on fairly low volume. He's kind of the new Doug Baldwin in that sense, where Russell Wilson isn't the quarterback that has the most pass attempts, but year after year, Tyler Lockett finishes fairly well. So this past year, he played all 16 games. He had 110 targets for over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. The year before, he was just under, but he only had 70 targets, 57 receptions for just under 1,000 yards, but 10 touchdowns. So we thought regression was going to happen. Obviously, it did a little bit for the touchdown percentage, but more targets came his way. Now, we weren't projecting DK Metcalf to come out of the gun and really supplant him for the wide receiver one in that offense, but he came pretty darn close to it. So now a lot of analysts, a lot of people, a lot of even more casual fans really hope that DK Metcalf can make that sophomore boom. He had 100 targets, 50 receptions for 900 yards and 7 touchdowns. That's phenomenal for a rookie. We thought DK Metcalf was kind of that straight line runner. He was that 9 route guy that really his route tree was limited. But I think as a first year rookie wide receiver, he outperformed and did really, really well that anyone was really projecting. So now the real question is if you're willing to take him in your fantasy drafts, and do you take him before Tyler Lockett? So I'm going to go through my research here and kind of figure out where and how confident you should be in these wide receivers. So let's find out how successful they were versus zone, man, double coverage, press coverage, and all that. So I'm going to start with Tyler Lockett here. Lockett was really great versus man. He was 77.5 versus man. He ran 160 routes, the most routes on his route tree versus man coverage, and he did really well. And that's probably not surprising. Russell Wilson's a very accurate quarterback, and we'll get him the football in space. And he obviously beat guys versus man. He also excelled versus press coverage, which should also say he was 83.7% versus press, which is also great for that wide receiver. He did not get doubled a lot. He got doubled 19 times, but only had a 63% success rate. And versus zone, he was 81%. Russell Wilson found him in those holes in the zone, and he obviously had a great year. He won people championships. He wasn't drafted very high last year, and he was that really safe wide receiver. Now, Metcalf, people are really excited about. He's a guy that popped off early. He might be a keeper in your leagues potentially. If you don't play in those leagues, he's going to be a guy in that late to fourth round that you're going to be looking at being like, well, he's really good. he could be a guy that he's on your fantasy team for a long time and in dynasty leagues. So he ran 99 routes versus man, which I'm shocked at because he's bigger than most cornerbacks in the league, and he had a really good 73.9% success rate. 81% success versus zone, double coverage. He was only doubled 7 times. He was 57%, which isn't great. And then versus press, he was pressed 91 times. He's a big guy, so those cornerbacks really get in there and slow him down. But he had a 74.7% success rate, which is one of those things where you want it to be a little higher for a guy like that. But again, rookie season, you understand, maybe you give him some time. Even though last year in the rookies, we have high expectations. We had A.J. Brown, we had Terry McLaurin. We had guys that really popped off. Darius Slayton is the guy that people like late. So we want DK Metcalf to be that guy as well. So I'm not really worried about consistency with DK Metcalf, but I will take a look at the consistency for Tyler Lockett this past year. He led the league in red zone targets which is with the 20-yard line and in. But I'm going to look at DK Metcalf. So wide receiver 1, he was 12% of the time. Wide receiver 2, 18%. 1 to 2, so 31% of the time he was a wide receiver 1 or 2, which is pretty good. You didn't have to draft him last year. You took him in the 9th, 10th, late round guy. I guess I will take a look at Tyler Lockett here. 1 or 2, 50% of the time. So if you had Tyler Lockett on your team, he was great. He was very consistent. 43% of the time he was a wide receiver 4 or worse, which again isn't super great. But I mean, expectations, he wasn't an early round quarterback or wide receiver anyway, so it wasn't too bad. He was very safe for your fantasy team. I'm going to keep going here. So usage data, target data, Tyler Lockett, 65.3% of his targets were caught. He dropped 0% of his targets. That's phenomenal. That is phenomenal. He's got great hands. He was in the slot about 66% of the time, which is a great guy for DK or for Russell Wilson to target short yardage passes and takes it. Hopefully has some yards after catch, but we're going to look at some more of that later. Metcalf, again, now he was outside left 63% of the time, so he's that X wide receiver for Seattle. Yeah, I think that's good too. That's what you want as a wide receiver 1, a prototypical wide receiver 1. Now, looking at some advanced metrics and contested catches and broken tackles, that's where DK Metcalf really shines. So contested catches, 27% of his catches were contested, and he had an 81.3 success rate. That is phenomenal. Tyler Lockett had only a 61.5% success rate versus contested catches, and 17% of his passes were contested. Broken tackles. DK Metcalf had a 27.3% times of catches where he broke 2 or more tackles. That is phenomenal. That led the league. And unfortunately, Tyler Lockett did not break 2 or more tackles once. He had 0%. He wasn't good at breaking tackles. That's not his game. That's not his thing. So that gives you some analysis. All that stuff's brought to you by Reception Perception. It's a lot of really good information. Hopefully you can dive through that a little bit. That helps you a little bit. Their ADPs are very close. They're right around the back of the 4th round, early 5th round. So DK Metcalf is at the 411, where Tyler Lockett is at the 503. And by the time your drafts come along, I think they're going to be neck and neck. People are going to have to decide one or the other. You can't have both guys. You have to have one. So if I told you Russell Wilson will have more pass attempts this year. Last year, he had 516 pass attempts. If I told you he was going to have over 600, around 600 pass attempts, where would you take these guys? And that's, I think, where his projections should land. Russell Wilson has in the range of outcomes to be the number 1 overall quarterback. He's so efficient. He's super good at as a quarterback. He's a winner, this guy. And I think there's a very good possibility that he gets up to that 600 pass attempts. Reasons why I think that is because their running back core is pretty deteriorated. Chris Carson is banged up. Rashad Penny is on the pup. There's no one else really of note in that backfield. Carlos Hyde they signed. He's the guy that could get you yards that are given to him at this point in his career. He's not a guy that's going to pop off and have an outstanding year and demand the football. So even though Chris Carson should be their lead back, should be the guy that gets most of the targets, he's banged up right now. We're not sure how much they can rely on a guy like Chris Carson. So with that being said, they're going to be passing the ball more. We saw Will Dissly, who broke out the first couple weeks. He's now practicing. He's coming back again from a really horrific injury, which should lend to more passing attempts for the Seattle Seahawks. Their defense is good. Seattle traded for Jamal Adams. Their defense should be good, but they have let me look at their schedule. They should have some games where they need to pass. They need to throw the football, which should lead to more passing attempts as well. That's what you want. In fantasy, you kind of do want to, if you have a team with a bad defense, you want, or a quarterback that turns the ball over, that's better for the offensive fantasy teams or players on the team. So the Dallas Cowboys, their defense is a little bit rough right now. They lost some guys, they have some injuries, so wheels up for Dak Prescott and all those passing attacks and Zeke Elliott. It's going to be go for that offense. So if Seattle's defense is too good and they get up early and they run the ball out, that's not good for their pass catchers. But I still think this having Russell back in the shotgun and throwing the ball more is going to be is in the range of outcomes, and it's going to be obviously great for these guys. So I think both of them can outperform their ADP. I do believe that DK Metcalf can make a step forward. He was only a rookie last year. He's going to want to be that number one rookie in his class. Him and AJ Brown, they're great friends, but I think there's some competition there because AJ had a phenomenal year. I think DK Metcalf thinks he deserves to be the number one rookie in that offense. Hey, I'm putting words in his mouth, but I do believe he thinks that. He's a hard worker. He lives at the gym. You can see him working hard, and I think he's going to work on his craft and build that relationship with Russell Wilson. He is that prototypical 6'4", 230-pound, big kind of Des Bryant type guy, where I think he's going to be a super red zone target, and is going to be a guy that Russell Wilson relies on and looks at in the red zone. Now, Tyler Lockett is no slouch either. He has a really good chance to do it. He led the league in red zone targets at like 28%, but he also but DK Metcalf as a rookie was only around 21%. So he wasn't so far ahead of DK that you're kind of like, oh no, Russ only looks at Tyler Lockett in the red zone. No, DK can hold his own. He's a big body guy. He's a bruiser. I think if he kind of fine tunes his craft, he can expand his route tree, work in the slot a little bit, move around the field, maybe keep him on the left side, and that's fine. But he's going to be a guy that you can rely on. If I was between the two, I'm going to take DK Metcalf first. I'm taking DK Metcalf first. I'm taking that big-bodied guy, the guy that could be that back-end wide receiver one, when I do think that Tyler Lockett could do that, but at his age, we know who he is. He's very safe. And I'm going to go with the high risk. I'm going to go with DK Metcalf. I'm going to talk to you about some projections for the two of them before I go, and to kind of give you an idea of what I expect. So at wide receiver here, I'm going to have DK Metcalf for around 75 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 8.5 touchdowns. All right. I'm going to have Tyler Lockett I'm going to give him closer to that 70 receptions, 900 yards, 5 touchdowns, and he's going to be okay for your fantasy team, but he's going to be that guy you want as your wide receiver 3, not your wide receiver 2. So that's going to be my final analysis. Hopefully, if you think I'm crazy, if you think Tyler Lockett is just that locked and loaded safe guy, get at me. If you think he has more upside than you think, send me a tweet. I'm Lando_FF. This is the Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. We are on Twitter, Instagram, at Snap_Fantasy. Either way, what we know is that the Seattle Seahawks wide receivers led the league, I believe, with 71 targets in the red zone. Both of them are going to have an opportunity to be good. I just think DK Metcalf is going to be better. So, sorry, I forgot to say that little stat for you. But either way, holler at me, tweet me, DM me, get at me. We'll see you next time. All right, guys? Take it easy.